My ex-girlfriend, Trisha, spiraled out of control and tried to stab me. It was one of the most terrifying moments of my life, and it all happened in front of the cops. She ended up being taken to a psychiatric ward after the incident, and for days she kept reaching out to me, begging for forgiveness and asking me to take her back. Trisha had been my first kiss when I was just 15. Somehow, after 20 years of no contact, she found me on MySpace and messaged me, asking if I would be her first. I agreed, and during that intimate moment, she told me she loved me. For some reason, I found myself saying it back, even though I wasn't sure I meant it. Shortly after, she asked me to be her boyfriend, and I impulsively said yes. For the next 3 months, we were in a toxic cycle, breaking up and getting back together every couple of weeks. I was at my limit. I had taken her back 5 times already when I finally decided I couldn't do it anymore. I broke things off with her for good. She started sobbing uncontrollably, but I stood firm, returning to my room to distract myself by looking for apartments online. While I was browsing, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the shadow of something moving. Then suddenly, a butcher knife came crashing down toward me. I barely managed to dodge it as it slammed into the keyboard. Trisha wasn't done. She swung the knife at me several more times, and though I tried to evade her, she managed to slice my arm. In a frenzy of adrenaline, I somehow wrestled the knife away from her and held her down until she calmed down. I told her I was leaving, and if she tried to stop me, I would call the cops. But instead of letting me leave, she ran back to the kitchen and grabbed another knife. This time, she started hurting herself. That's when I dialed 911 and ran outside. The cops arrived quickly, but as I was explaining the situation, I heard screaming behind me. Trisha was charging at me at full speed. Her hair flew wildly behind her as she ran, her face twisted in fury. The cops stood there, momentarily frozen, unsure of how to react. I tried to back away, but I tripped and fell to the ground, and before I could get back up, Trisha was on top of me. She scratched at me with her nails, clawing and screaming. I managed to push her off, but she came at me again. I grabbed her wrists to stop her from hitting me, and I could hear the cops yelling, though I couldn't make out their words. I just knew I had to stop her from hurting me. Finally, one of the officers grabbed me and pulled me away while another restrained Trisha. She kicked and screamed, still fighting to get to me. My face burned from where her nails had scratched me, and I could feel blood trickling down my cheek. The officers held her back, and as they dragged her toward the police car, she yelled at me through tears, asking why I was doing this, why I wouldn't take her back. She kept screaming that she loved me and needed me. They finally managed to get her into the car, and one of the officers stayed behind to ask if I was all right. I nodded, but my eyes stayed locked on Trisha, who was now in the back seat, her face pressed against the window, staring at me as they drove away. I felt a strange mixture of relief and guilt. I didn't know what was going to happen to her, but I knew I couldn't continue living like this. A few days later, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was a nurse from the psychiatric hospital where Trisha had been admitted. She told me that Trisha had been asking for me nonstop and that she wouldn't calm down unless she saw me. I was silent for a long time. Part of me wanted to forget everything, to move on, but another part of me felt obligated to go. I wanted to make sure she was okay. In the end, I agreed to visit. When I arrived at the hospital, a nurse led me through a series of locked doors, each one closing with a heavy thud that echoed down the empty hallways, making my heart race. Finally, we stopped outside a small room with a thick window. Trisha was inside, sitting on the bed with her knees pulled up to her chest. When I saw Trisha at the hospital, she looked so small and scared. Her eyes widened the moment she spotted me, and she jumped up, rushing to the door, but it was locked. She banged on the glass, shouting my name. The nurse unlocked the door, and Trisha ran straight into my arms, wrapping herself around me. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't mean to. I don't know what happened. Please forgive me." I stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to push her away, but another part wanted to comfort her. I awkwardly patted her back, trying to calm her down. "It's okay," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I really believed that. She pulled back and looked at me, her eyes swollen and red from crying. "I love you," she whispered. "I know I messed up, but I love you so much. Please don't leave me." I took a deep breath before replying, "Trisha, I can't do this anymore. You need real help. I can't be the one to save you. You have to do this for yourself." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "I will," she said. "I promise I'll do whatever it takes. Just please don't give up on me." I hesitated, feeling my heart ache. I didn't know if I could keep doing this, but I couldn't just abandon her. "I won't give up on you," I said after a pause, "but you have to get better. You have to do this for yourself." She loosened her grip on my arms and whispered, "Okay, I'll try. I promise I'll try." I started visiting Trisha every week after that. At first, it was difficult. She was still upset, still scared, but over time, I saw her slowly begin to improve. She started smiling more, talking more. She shared stories about her therapy sessions, telling me how she was learning to control her emotions and manage her anger and fear. I could see the changes in her. She wasn't completely different, but she was calmer, more at peace. She wasn't perfect, but she was making an effort, and it showed. One day, Trisha told me she was getting released from the hospital. I didn't know how to feel. On one hand, I was happy that she was better, but I was also afraid. Was I ready to have her back in my life full-time? I want to try again, she said softly. I know I messed up, but I want to make things right. I want to be with you the right way this time. I looked at her, unsure of what to say. I cared about her, but I wasn't sure if I could trust her again. I don't know, Trisha, I said after a long pause. A lot has happened. I don't know if we can just go back to how things were. Her shoulders slumped as she looked down at her hands. I know, she replied quietly. I don't expect everything to be perfect. I just want a chance to show you I'm better now. Please. I thought about it for a long time. All the pain, the fear, the chaos came rushing back to me. But then I also thought about the good times, about the girl who had given me my first kiss, and the woman who was now trying so hard to change. Okay, I said finally, but we take it slow. No rushing into things. We do this the right way. A small smile appeared on her face. Okay, slow. I can do that. We began dating again, cautiously this time. We kept things simple, dates at the park, grabbing coffee, just getting to know each other again. Trisha was different now, more thoughtful, more careful. She still had her moments where she got upset or scared, but she was better at controlling her emotions. She didn't let them overwhelm her like before. One night, as we sat in her apartment watching a movie, she looked over at me and smiled. I'm glad we're doing this, she said. I'm glad we're taking it slow, I smiled back. Me too, I replied. I think it's good for us. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, I love you. I know I'm not perfect, but I'm trying. I want to be the best I can be for you. I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her closer. I love you too, I said softly. And I know you're trying. I see it every day. For a while, things felt peaceful between us. A few months later, Trisha moved in with me. It was a big step, but we both felt ready. At first, things were great. We spent our days laughing, talking, cooking together, and enjoying each other's company. We went on long walks and watched movies, and I finally felt like we were moving forward as a real couple. But soon, cracks began to show. Trisha still had her moments. She would get upset over small things, like if I didn't text her back immediately or if I talked to another woman. She'd become moody, and I never knew what would trigger it. One night, we had a huge argument because I had gone out with friends without telling her, and she accused me of not caring about her anymore. After the argument, I tried to explain that it was just a misunderstanding, that I hadn't meant to upset her, but Trisha wasn't listening. She stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. I sat on the couch, feeling frustrated and hurt, unsure of what to do next. I cared about her deeply, but I wasn't sure how much longer I could handle the emotional roller coaster, the constant ups and downs, the mood swings that seemed to come out of nowhere. A few hours later, she returned. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she looked exhausted. Sitting down beside me, her shoulders slumped, she whispered, I'm sorry. I know I overreacted. I get scared sometimes. I'm scared of losing you. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. Trisha, I'm not going anywhere, I said softly, but you have to trust me. You have to believe that I care about you, that I want to be with you. She nodded, wiping away tears. I know, she said, her voice cracking. I'm trying, really I am. I put my arm around her, pulling her close. I know you're trying, I reassured her, and I'm here for you. But we need to work on this, on trusting each other, on communicating better. She nodded again, resting her head on my shoulder. Okay, she whispered. I promise, I'll try. We continued working on our relationship, committed to making it better. We started going to therapy together, talking through our issues, and trying to find healthier ways to communicate. It wasn't easy, but we both wanted to make it work. One evening, as we sat in the park watching the sunset, Trisha looked over at me with a serious expression. I love you, she said. I know I'm not perfect, but I love you, and I want to spend my life with you. My heart raced as I reached into my pocket. My hand shook slightly as I pulled out a small box and opened it to reveal a simple ring. I love you too, I said, my voice steady. Will you marry me? For a moment, Trisha's eyes widened, and I feared she might say no. But then tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling. Yes, I'll marry you. We hugged each other tightly, both of us crying with joy and relief. I felt a sense of overwhelming happiness and peace. Things weren't perfect, but I knew we were in this together, committed to facing whatever challenges came our way as a team. After the engagement, life still wasn't without its challenges. We continued to have our ups and downs, and Trisha still had moments of jealousy and insecurity. But she was getting better at managing those feelings, learning to trust me and believe that I wasn't going to leave her. We began planning our future, talking about marriage, buying a house, starting a family. We were excited about what was ahead, even if there were still occasional obstacles. Trisha continued to have difficult days, times when she felt overwhelmed or scared. She would become distant and moody, and I never knew exactly what might trigger those emotions. But I was learning to be patient, to be understanding, and to be there for her when she needed me most. One day, as we sat together on the couch watching TV, Trisha looked over at me, her expression soft. "I'm sorry for everything," she said quietly. "I know I've put you through a lot. I'm just so grateful that you've stuck by me." I smiled, reaching over to take her hand. "I'm grateful for you, too," I said. "I know it hasn't been easy, but I wouldn't trade this for anything. I love you, and I'm so glad we're in this together." Her eyes shone as she smiled back. "I love you too," she whispered. We sat there for a long time, holding each other in a comfortable silence. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. I knew things weren't perfect, but I also knew that we were on the right path, building a life together, one day at a time. And no matter what the future held, I was confident we would face it together, as a team.